The storm swallowed the city in darkness. Rain slashed against the pavement, pooling in rivers that swallowed shoes whole. Lightning split the sky, casting fleeting shadows across the glass towers above. Andrew Bennett pulled his jacket tight, breath ragged, knowing he couldn't afford to be late tonight. But then, through the downpour, he saw her, stranded, struggling, and his next choice would alter everything. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Rain hammered the streets of Chicago like nails against glass. Andrew Bennett, 36, kept his head down as he hurried through the downpour, his worn jacket clinging to his shoulders. He was late, again. Tonight's interview at Hale Technologies was his last chance at steady work, a chance to prove to his son, Eli, that things could still change for them. Halfway across the flooded intersection, his eyes caught the beam of a luxury sedan, stuck deep in the mud by the curb. The driver's door opened, and a woman in a tailored coat stepped out, heels sinking uselessly into the muck. She cursed under her breath, tugging at the wheel with no success. Andrew froze. He didn't have the minutes to spare, not if he wanted to make the interview on time. But something in the sight of her, stranded, alone, trying not to look helpless, pulled at him. Eli's voice echoed in his mind from the night before, "Dad, you always say we help people, even when it's hard." He sighed, dropped his bag in the rain, and waded toward her. "Pop it in neutral," he shouted over the storm. She blinked at him, startled, but obeyed. Andrew dug his boots into the mud, shoulder to the trunk, and with one raw heave the sedan lurched free. The woman's eyes widened as the car rolled back onto the asphalt. She reached for her purse. "At least let me pay you." But Andrew was already jogging off through the rain. "Don't need it," he called back. He had an interview to catch. By the time Andrew burst through the glass doors of Hale Technologies, his shirt clung to him, rain dripping onto the polished marble. The receptionist barely looked up, her expression rehearsed in cool efficiency. "Interview for logistics coordinator," Andrew panted, brushing water from his face. Her fingers tapped briskly on the keyboard. "You're Andrew Bennett?" He nodded, relief sparking in his chest. Maybe he wasn't too late. But her next words crushed him. The hiring manager moved on. "The slot's closed. You can reapply in 6 months." Andrew blinked. 6 months? "Ma'am, Her voice stayed flat. "I'm sorry. That's policy." He stood frozen, the weight of every unpaid bill, every school expense for Eli, pressing down. 6 months might as well have been forever. "Please," he said quietly, but she was already back to typing. He lingered another moment, then turned, shoulders heavy, and walked back into the storm. Outside, the rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. His reflection in the darkened windows looked older than 36, tired, worn, invisible. He had done everything right, dressed his best, prepared answers, fought through the storm. But none of it mattered. As he trudged down the slick sidewalk, a sleek black SUV slowed beside him. The tinted window rolled down, and a familiar voice called through the mist. "You didn't even take the money," the woman from the stranded car said. Her sharp gray eyes studied him closely. "Why?" Andrew froze, rain dripping from his chin. "Because kindness isn't for sale." Her lips curved, just slightly. "Get in." Andrew hesitated at the curb, water dripping from his hair as the SUV idled. The woman's tone wasn't a request, it carried the kind of authority that demanded obedience. Against every instinct, he opened the door and slid into the leather seat. The air inside was warm, scented faintly of expensive perfume. The driver glanced at him in the rearview but said nothing. Andrew sat stiffly, clutching his damp bag, painfully aware of his mud-streaked boots on the spotless floor mat. The woman leaned back, studying him with calm precision. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Andrew shook his head. Does it matter? Her smile was quick, sharp. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Technologies. The words hit like a lightning strike. Andrew blinked, stunned. He had just been shut out of her company's doors, and now he was sitting in her car. She continued, her gaze never wavering. I recognized you the second you pushed my car out of that ditch. You're one of today's rejected candidates, aren't you? Andrew cleared his throat. Logistics coordinator. But HR said the role's filled. Victoria's eyes narrowed, voice dropping to a quiet edge. HR makes a lot of mistakes. They see resumes. I see character. And what I saw this morning was a man late for an interview who still stopped to help a stranger. He met her gaze, caught between disbelief and a flicker of hope. So what now? The SUV turned sharply into a private garage beneath a towering skyscraper of glass and steel. Victoria's voice was calm, decisive. Now, she said, you'll prove to me whether HR was wrong. The elevator doors opened to a floor buzzing with panic. Phones rang off the hook, executives barked into headsets, and a giant screen on the wall flashed red error messages across a logistics dashboard. Victoria strode out first, her heels clicking sharply against marble. Andrew followed, out of place in his rain-soaked jacket. Heads turned. Some stared with open irritation. Who's that? Whispered a suited man, glaring. Victoria ignored them. Systems down, she demanded. Yes, ma'am, a frantic manager replied. The entire logistics platform crashed an hour ago. We can't track shipments, orders are piling up, clients are furious, this could cost millions before lunch. Andrew froze at the sight of the flashing screens. His own life might be crumbling, but the chaos here was staggering. He stepped back, ready to fade into the background, until Victoria turned to him. You've run small businesses. You were a Marine. You know pressure. Prove it. Andrew blinked. Excuse me? You want a chance? There it is, she said flatly, nodding toward the system. Every executive stared, some smirking. This is absurd, one man sneered. He's not even staff. But Victoria's gaze never wavered. Then he has nothing to lose. Andrew swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. He stepped forward, scanning the system logs on the flickering screen. Familiar words leapt out, routing errors, queue overloads, server loopbacks. He'd seen similar issues before, in both the Marines and his father's old supply shop. He drew a steady breath, blocking out the stares. I'll need a terminal, and someone to fetch me a strong cup of coffee. A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. But Victoria's lips curved into the faintest smile. You heard him. Get it done. Andrew sat at the terminal, his damp jacket clinging to his shoulders as lines of code and error logs scrolled past. Around him, a half-circle of executives murmured in irritation. This is ridiculous, one muttered. We need IT, not some. Andrew's fingers flew across the keyboard. With respect, he cut in, his tone even but firm, your IT team's been spinning wheels for an hour. This isn't hardware, it's a routing loop caused by a bad update. You've got your entire platform talking to itself. Silence fell. For a man who wasn't supposed to belong in the room, he suddenly had all eyes on him. Victoria folded her arms, watching. Can you fix it? Andrew exhaled slowly. Not alone. But if someone pulls the backup files from yesterday's server image, and if you've got a failover system not completely neglected, then yes. A nervous tech assistant darted forward. I can get those. Good. Move. Andrew's voice carried a quiet authority, the kind drilled into him during long nights in the Marines. He turned to another exec. Call your major clients now. Tell them you're implementing a stability patch, not that you're panicking. Control the story before it controls you. The man blinked, startled, but lifted his phone. Minutes stretched. Sweat slid down Andrew's temples as he rerouted systems, bypassed broken nodes, and forced a clean sync. The dashboard flickered once, twice, then green lights began spreading across the map. Shipments back online, the assistant stammered. Orders are moving again. A stunned hush filled the room. Executives glanced at one another as if waking from a bad dream. Victoria stepped forward, her gaze locked on Andrew. "Well, Mr. Bennett, it seems HR was wrong." The relief in the room was short-lived. As the screen stabilized, a tall executive in an immaculate suit slammed his folder shut. His nameplate read Ethan Price, Senior VP of Operations. "This is outrageous," Ethan snapped. "We can't hand over critical systems to a stranger who wandered in off the street." Andrew straightened, exhaustion and adrenaline still buzzing through him. "I didn't wander in. I was asked. And I didn't take over, I fixed what your team couldn't." A ripple of murmurs followed. Some executives looked away, uncomfortable. Others nodded faintly, unwilling to admit Andrew had just saved their quarterly numbers. Ethan sneered. "For all we know, you caused this mess. Maybe this is some stunt to get attention." Andrew's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Victoria stepped between them. Her tone was calm but sharp as glass. "Enough, Ethan. You've had an hour to contain this crisis. He solved it in 15 minutes. Do you want to argue about resumes, or do you want to keep your company running?" The VP flushed, but his voice dripped with sarcasm. "What's next? Make him head of logistics? Maybe CFO while we're at it?" Andrew swallowed back the sting. He wasn't here for titles. He thought of Eli, drawing rocket ships at the kitchen table, asking when Dad would get a real job. That image steadied him. He met Ethan's glare evenly. "I don't need your chair. I just need a chance to earn mine." Victoria's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "And that," she said, turning to the board, "is exactly the kind of man I want in this company." The tension eased slightly as the executives shuffled back to their tasks, though Ethan Price's glare lingered like a shadow. Victoria motioned Andrew into her corner office, a glass-walled space overlooking the storm-slick skyline. She poured 2 glasses of water, slid one toward him, and leaned against her desk. "You kept calm when the room wanted to unravel. That doesn't come from nowhere. Who are you, Andrew Bennett?" Andrew hesitated, fingers curling around the glass. He wasn't used to explaining himself, especially not to someone whose world looked nothing like his. But her gaze was steady, unblinking. "I was a Marine," he said finally. "Logistics, supply chains, field ops. After service, I ran a small shipping business. Did all right for a while, until a bad partner drained it dry. Left me with debt I'm still climbing out of." He paused, his throat tight. "And I've got an 8-year-old boy at home who deserves more than ramen noodles and overdue rent notices." Victoria's expression softened, just slightly. "Your son, what's his name?" "Eli. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. He keeps asking why the world only notices money, not effort." Andrew gave a humorless laugh. "I don't know how to answer him." For the first time, Victoria looked away, her jaw tightening as if she knew that question all too well. "Effort matters," she said quietly. "But only if someone's willing to see it." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, layered with things neither had said out loud in years. Then Victoria straightened, her steel returning. "Andrew, you said you need a chance. What if I give you one that could change everything?" The next morning, Andrew returned to Hale Technologies, his only suit still damp around the cuffs. He had expected silence or maybe a quick dismissal. Instead, Victoria ushered him straight into the boardroom. Half a dozen directors sat around the polished table, their faces skeptical, some openly hostile. At the head sat Ethan Price, arms folded like a gatekeeper daring Andrew to try. Victoria spoke first. Yesterday, Mr. Bennett saved us millions. Today, I want him to walk us through how he'd handle logistics restructuring. Consider this an audition. Andrew's stomach nodded. He wasn't a polished executive. He didn't speak in PowerPoint slides or buzzwords. But when he looked at the sprawling map on the screen, shipment routes, delays, costs, he saw patterns the others missed. He took a steady breath. You're bleeding money because you've got too many middlemen. Routes overlap. Drivers idle for hours waiting on outdated schedules. Morale tanks, and when morale tanks, mistakes multiply. A director scoffed. That's an oversimplification. Andrew met his eyes. Maybe. But the Marine Corps taught me that logistics is the difference between victory and disaster. And I'm looking at a disaster you can't afford to keep hiding behind spreadsheets. He tapped the screen, drawing a cleaner route with his finger. Cut out 2 depots. Streamline this hub. And stop treating workers like numbers, they're the backbone of every shipment. You respect them, they'll move mountains for you. Silence followed. Ethan smirked, certain Andrew had overstepped. But then one older director leaned forward, eyes glinting. He's right. We've been warning about inefficiencies for months. Victoria's gaze swept the room, daring anyone to contradict her. Gentlemen, this is what vision looks like. The boardroom emptied after hours of debate, leaving only Andrew, Victoria, and Ethan Price, who lingered by the window with a sour expression. You made quite the impression, Victoria said, her tone measured. Half the board sees potential. The other half thinks I'm insane for entertaining this. Andrew rubbed his palms against his knees. I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came because I can't keep failing my son. At that, Ethan pounced. And there it is, the sob story. You're not boardroom material, Bennett. You're desperation wrapped in a second-hand suit. That's not leadership. Andrew's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table to Victoria. It was Eli's drawing, crayons on lined paper. A rocket ship, labeled with clumsy block letters, Dad's new job. Victoria's hand stilled as she studied it. The crayon lines were shaky, but the message was clear. A child's hope, fragile but fierce. Andrew's voice was low but steady. That's why I'm here. Not for pride, not for money. For him. If you want to measure me, measure that. Ethan snorted. Pathetic. But Victoria didn't speak right away. Instead, she folded the drawing carefully, as if it were glass. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sharper than before, but also warmer. Mr. Bennett, she said firmly, sometimes the truest measure of a leader isn't how he fights for himself, but how he fights for those who can't. Ethan muttered something under his breath and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Andrew exhaled slowly, heart pounding. This felt like the moment everything balanced on a blade. The boardroom was quiet, the storm outside finally breaking into pale streaks of sunlight. Andrew sat at the table, his damp cuffs clinging to his wrists, heart pounding as if the walls themselves were listening. Victoria set Eli's drawing gently on the polished wood. You know, Andrew, resumes tell me where people have been. But they rarely tell me where they're going. Yesterday you proved you can keep calm when everything falls apart. Today you showed me why you fight at all. Andrew leaned forward, voice low. I don't need favors. I just need a chance to stand on my own 2 feet. Victoria's expression softened, then steeled again, the way only someone who had clawed her way through boardrooms could. Then here's your chance. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer letter. Head of Logistics Operations. 6-figure salary. Full benefits. Andrew stared, the words blurring for a moment as his throat tightened. This is real? Victoria's faint smile was the only answer he needed. I don't invest in luck, Mr. Bennett. I invest in character. You've got both grit and heart. That's rarer than you think. His chest swelled, relief and disbelief mingling until all he could see was Eli's face lighting up at the news. For once, the future didn't feel like a wall closing in, it felt open, waiting. Victoria stood, extending her hand. Welcome to Hale Technologies. Andrew rose, shaking it firmly. As he stepped outside into the clearing sky, the city gleamed fresh and alive. In his hand was a contract. In his heart was the certainty that one selfless act in the rain had changed the trajectory of his life forever. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.